All right. What is up, y'all? Will here with Schedule Fly, and this is the Restaurant Owners Uncorked podcast, brought to you by us here at Schedule Fly. Super simple web-based restaurant employee scheduling software backed by legendary customer service and all at a low price point. We've been doing this for 19 years almost now. Never raised our prices. Not saying we never will, but we haven't. So simple employee scheduling, great customer service, very affordable tool. If you're on pencil and paper or Excel, Google Sheets, we will make life easier. We will help you project your labor costs better. We'll make life easier for the scheduling manager and for the team who wants their schedule at their fingertips all the time. Or if you're on another scheduling software and you're looking at your tech stack and you're looking at how much you're spending, give us a shot. Schedulefly.com, 30-day free trial. If you will find my personal cell phone number on the website on 3 pages, and I use a flip phone. You can call it or you can text it, and I will be happy to talk to you about Schedulefly. All right, now let's get to Restaurant Owners Uncorked. And this is a great opportunity for me to speak to Jeremy and Angie Walton for the first time. We were contacted by a wonderful firm that they work with, and who has brought us some amazing, awesome guests over the last couple of years. So I know this is going to be another amazing episode. Jeremy, Angie, if y'all wouldn't mind, just take a minute and introduce yourselves.
Good morning. Thank you for having us. I'll let my wife go first. I get in trouble when
There you go. Smart man.
I go in front.
Well, I'm Angie Walton and partner with Jeremy, and I pretty much handle front of the house, back of the house operations, human resources, and anything else that you can add.
She's chief problem solver.
Right.
Problem solver. There you go.
Which is a day-to-day exercise. So, my name is Jeremy Walton. We have been married for a long time. This is our first endeavor working together, which has sort of been an interesting part of the adventure for sure. But we had the opportunity to start this company 5 years ago. I spent 30 plus years in luxury hospitality with some amazing companies and learned a lot. And then we had this really unique opportunity down here to create kind of a hospitality company, and starting with the restaurants that we have now. And it's been our tagline for that restaurant's life is an adventure. And I might regret putting that on the door because every time something goes wrong, everyone reminds me of that statement. So I feel like I asked for it, but it's been a great journey so far.
Yes, it is an adventure, especially in the hospitality business. So, okay, well, I don't have any script or any format that I follow. We just talk. But the one thing I always ask every guest, the only thing I ask every guest is to tell me when and why you got first started in hospitality. So y'all can both separately answer that, because I'm very curious.
Mine was by choice. Hers was by force, probably.
Very true.
If I were being candidly honest. No, I started like so many people in this industry, with a different career path. And in my younger days, I had a propensity to leap first and look second. And so, after spending some time in the Coast Guard, after finishing school and thinking I was going to go to law school, I became very disenchanted with that idea. And I had a relative who just said, "Hey, you really like to cook. Have you thought about, being a chef?" And again, as I said, I just was like, well, sure, that sounds like a great idea. And without a lot of forethought or research, I ended up, starting in an apprentice program at a country club with an executive chef, and spent 2.5 years in the back of the house. And then right before I was going to go to culinary school, the GM of that club said, "Hey, you really should, expose yourself to the front of the house and round yourself out." And so I did that for 2 years. I delayed going to culinary school, and then finished up my undergrad, and while I was working full time, and then ended up, she basically said, "All right, you're ready for a job." And I had, lined up 3 interviews and took one of them, and started out sort of in the private club side of things. But, it was a great opportunity. I got to walk a mile, and, I spent 2 years in the back of the house doing every possible position, and then spent time on, front of the house. And then I got the opportunity to kind of step into leadership. And then from there kind of grew into luxury hospitality with a lot of great brands like Beverage and Montage and Sea Island. And that really helped found my niche in that world and enjoyed it. But it was not my first, it's like a lot of people. It's not something that you knew going in, you wanted to do it. But when I got exposed to it and got immersed in it, it really was a great fit. And it became something that still to this day, I talked to the team about this. I said, I am very fortunate to do what I do. Even more fortunate to do it with my wife, but the fact that, I still have the same energy level today that I did when I started. It is, been something that's been very sustaining and very, inspiring to continue to be a part of. It is not without challenge and fraught with challenges, but it's been great. And so that's kind of how it led into it, and then had this opportunity to, actually later in life start a company, and that's been an incredibly rewarding part of the journey.
What is it about it that we're going to get into some of the challenges, but I want to know what it is about it that you love, that you still have this energy all these years later, Jeremy?
I think I was really fortunate. I had a mentor early on that when I was in that first leadership role, had been, he had this storied kind of career in hospitality. Worked at like, he was up there in years when I got to work with him, but he had worked at like the Copacabana Club and like Waldorf Astoria, and like, back when nobody cared who the chef was, it was all about the maitre d's and this sort of iconic hospitality of the olden days. And so it was a great opportunity to kind of get a peek into, his world and insights and learn from him. But he asked me one day walking down the hallway, he says, "What are you responsible for?" And I gave him a textbook answer of like, planning, organizing, control, and he says, "No, son, those are the things you do as part of this job, but what are you responsible for?" And I kind of just stared at him, a blank stare. And he looked at me and says, "You're responsible for people's memories. You have the opportunity to participate in people's lives at some very specific and special moments." And he said, in those moments, you're going to either add something to it or you're going to take something away. And he says, you won't really, you might not now, but you will later if you stay with this, really come to appreciate the impact that can have. And it really kind of opened my eyes to the fact that, yes, there's an excitement and energy around the creativity of food and beverage, and creating dishes and creating beverages and building wine lists and creating these hospitality experiences. But he was right, as and he said, look, you're going to be there when their daughter gets engaged. You're going to be there at, anniversaries, weddings, birth of a child, and big business deals, hole in ones. Like, he had a whole list. But he also said, you're going to be there when they pass. And that was kind of powerful. And in this, I've actually done 3 funerals, catered in-home 3 funerals in my career. And you start to really appreciate how people connect around the table, how it breaks down barriers, how food and hospitality show up in the best of times and the worst of times. And you do have the ability to sort of, insert yourself into these moments, and you really have to think beyond just the delivery of food and drink, and think about this, what does this mean in context of building relationships and creating kind of, genuine relationships and creating memorable experiences, which is kind of our whole company mission statement, built around that notion. We don't really talk a lot about food and beverage in our mission statement. It's what we do. It's it's the prism through which we do it. And that's a fun aspect of it. But there is this ability to connect with people in a different way. And that's sort of been the thing that's sort of been, I think, elevated the notion of that, we have these restaurants, and, we peddle food and beverage, every day. And we've tried to, focus more on the relationship and experience piece of it, because we have to do the technical incredibly well. Our concepts, our locations, our clientele, are very affluent, very well traveled. They have very high expectations. They know great service. They know great food. So technical brilliance is kind of baked in at the, it's kind of the ante end of the game anyway for us. And so we strive to do that well, but where we try to distinguish ourselves is the ability to, really make these meaningful connections and add to these moments where we can.
That was such a fortuitous conversation
Mm-hmm.
to help you crystallize what really matters in this business. And if you can understand that and that gets you excited, that's got to be the fuel, I would imagine, that will, it's like a fire that'll never burn out, so that when you do have the challenges, you can always go back to, we're going to overcome this challenge because what matters most is that we're here to create memories for people. I love that. I love that. That gave me chills, dude.
Thanks, brother.
Angie, what's your backstory?
She got hijacked.
I was going to say, so.
My background was social work and therapy, and so this is, I mean, it certainly lines up after getting in the industry. But we were opening a restaurant during COVID, and so with everything, I came along to assist, and started out we actually met in the restaurant industry. We met at North River. I was a hostess and he was in the kitchen. So I said, okay, I'll come and I'll work the host stand. That sounds fun. I can do that. And then, 5 years later, here we are.
Yeah.
When we started, I said, listen, I really want to make a difference. I want to come in. We're going to do it this way. And he's like, sure. Yeah, that sounds great. And, what I will say is that it's been a lot of fun. But the relationship part goes much farther. It's not just, the experience for the guest, but what we do every day with the team that we work with. We just feel it's very important that they are well cared for, that they are heard, valued, and we start there. And you have employees that want to come to work, they feel respected. It just comes full circle. So I guess that.
Well, then if you were doing social work, and I mean, with is a different form of the same idea, which is, you clearly have a propensity to want to help other people and, help them understand why they're important and that they feel known and loved and validated. I mean, everybody wants validation that they matter. There's different careers where you can provide that. Hospitality is one of the more unique ones because sometimes you can provide that in a situation where maybe they're not even really expecting it. They go out to a family meal or whatever, and then the experience is so good and they felt so cared for that they remember it. And of course, what you want is to have those relationships and build those one at a time. So you have customers that are just coming back, whether it's people that live there where you are in the Panhandle, or it's a lot of people vacation there and you want them back every time they come, I suppose.
Yeah. It's the goal.
I mean, it is, what I think is, I jokingly tell everybody when I'm asked this question that, there's two realities. One, which she was ideally suited for. One of the most important pieces for us was the culture. And I think, in terms of what she had done, both personally and professionally, I think made her really suited for that aspect of it. But what was really remarkable was on the technical side, I guess, I don't know if she had just paid attention all those years of me complaining about everything else that we were doing everywhere else I worked. But I'd say fast learner is kind of an understatement in the fact that she just absorbed all of it and really rounded out sort of the people aspect of it and the cultural aspect of it with an incredible grasp on the technical. And those two things together, I mean, I jokingly tell people that the kind of yin and yang to our dynamic is that where I am 100% like so many people in our industry, afflicted with the creative side. Like we obsess over the creativity and the details and that part of it. And that's certainly one of the things that is near and dear to my heart about it. And she certainly has that as well, but she's not afflicted with it. It's not debilitating for her. She literally is so task oriented that she's able to sort of focus and prioritize and see things through to completion and has such wonderful relationships with the team in the midst of doing that. It has really helped sort of create the culture that we were trying to achieve from the beginning. And I don't know that we would have been as successful doing it without her in the role that she's in. So it's kind of been remarkable. Yeah.
Well, you said yin and yang. I mean, you need that. You need us creatives need that balance of execution and organization and attention to detail. And, you bring those two together and you find a good confluence where it can all work. And without that, it can get challenging.
The irony is we couldn't move a mattress together at home without killing each other. So the really kind of remarkable thing is how this dynamic has worked, within the restaurants has been great. So,
we'll get into this business marriage and personal marriage. So, okay. So, when did you start your first restaurant? I think you said it, but
yeah, so we had it was kind of an interesting origin story. I was working for Alys Beach as vice president of resort operations, and it's this beautiful community down here. It was in very early beginnings. We were doing a lot of expansion and growth, and we were building a lot of the amenities, building a lot of homes, and we were developing the town center. And I got tasked with, sort of trying to recruit different restaurateurs and chefs because of my background and relationships throughout the Southeast and the country with a lot of that community. They had asked me, could you sort of curate a list of people that would be a great fit to develop concepts within town center? And so had a lot of great conversations with a lot of colleagues and friends of mine that were very busy in other markets and were a little bit sort of like, wait, where is this in Florida again? I'm confused, the kind of forgotten coast that we live on. And they're like, oh, that sounds terribly seasonal. We're too busy in Nashville and Charlotte and DC. And they were doing great projects in other places and they were intrigued, but I think they were a little bit on the fence. And, I'm a super risk averse person. We have 4 kids and I've had a wonderful career, great companies. And, so I was always, I think, had it in mind. I wanted to do this, but I probably was so risk averse. I could never line up the pros to outweigh the cons. And as we were, having multiple conversations, she looked at me one day and said, why wouldn't we do it? And I was like, well, I can give you 100 reasons why we
I
wouldn't
think I said,
open.
when you do.
Oh yeah,
That's
probably true.
Yeah.
And it's a huge leap, into, with steady income, 4 children to raise, about to go to college. And, it was a big leap, but, we started to have a meaningful dialogue around, all of it. I had spent 5 years working here. I knew the market. I had operated the restaurants that we had within the resort and the other amenities. And we'd really kind of gotten to know the community and gotten connected with the community and, the pros outweighed the cons. And, we went through an exhaustive list of, whys and, why to do it, why not to do it. And I can tell you there were 2 things that did not make the do not do it list, which was one was zombie apocalypse and the other one was, global pandemic. Sadly, one of those occurred, and the irony was we were, this is 2020. We're in the middle of construction. Thankfully, I was still consulting and assisting with projects at Alys. So, it was a wonderful opportunity to be able to continue building and be able to support the family. But, we had run into a lot of budget overruns and construction delays with Citizen, our first restaurant. And, at the time, those seemed like just, they were devastating. But what happened in the end is they proved to be blessings in disguise because the delays, if we would have stayed on schedule, we would have opened in June of 2020, which was when Florida was shut down. Right. And so it would have, I don't know that we would have come back from that. And so we were lucky. That pushed out to like January of 21. And one of the things that I had been, enlisted to do with Alys was to try to help them reopen and develop their reopening protocols. And nobody knew, there's so much misinformation. Nobody knew what was what dealing with a pandemic. But look, if you're going to employ me to do it, I need to figure it out anyway. So yeah, absolutely. And so we created best practices to reopen resort. We took those into the restaurant when we opened. We had, pretty strict protocols, and we didn't know what we were doing, but we based that off of what a lot of people did in Hong Kong and other places where they deal with it. And we were successful in opening. We had about 3 days of actual disruption to the business due to that. Other restaurants in here were closing 2 weeks at a time, and so we felt that we managed it incredibly well, regardless of what everybody thought about the protocols. We had a great outcome, and we had an incredible first year, but it was such a roller coaster in the fact that, I had all these colleagues and friends, but I couldn't pick up the phone and call them because they were dealing with the if you had an established restaurant and, all these employees and you had shut down, like everyone was sort of in turmoil. And I had one buddy of mine who was in Birmingham opening a restaurant building, and he was in the same boat. And we were about the only two people that, could sort of, communicate with each other and support one another, because we were like, there's no way to turn around. At that point, we were going to build this restaurant because we were too far gone to stop and walk away. And so we just didn't know what the outcome was going to be. And we were so fortunate, that we opened. We had an incredible first year. Obviously, a lot of people fled to this area during the pandemic, which helped create some growth, and ended up, we were able to survive that maybe better than a lot of other people, but nobody in our industry was not impacted by that. And we were just, incredibly lucky to sort of, for things to sort of line up and come together the way they did. We got really lucky. So, we were fortunate to get open and have an incredible first year. And so Citizen was our first restaurant, and we opened in January of 21. It just hit the 5-year mark, this month, or last month. Oh yeah, January. And it's been incredibly well received. We've been, really, humbled by the response that restaurant's gotten. And then, of course, in true fashion, we started, about 2 years in, we started on the second one, which is right across the street from Citizen. So we developed 2 of the restaurants in the town center in Alys Beach, and it's been a great sort of, it's been 2 great projects that have been incredibly well received.
How did you? Okay, so you can't bake a pandemic into the plan, but you had pros outweighing the cons outside of some literally unimaginable black swan event happening.
Sure.
But you're risk averse. How did you overcome the financial risk part of it? And did you borrow money, raise money, sell equity? How did you fund this thing?
So this might be the most remarkable part of the story. Is if you think about this, is going to sound almost crazy, but those construction budget overruns that we ran into early on, when we originally started this project, we were sort of self-financing. It was, my father-in-law, and myself, and we were, we had it all worked out great. The math all worked on paper until it didn't. And, I had sort of in mind, if I had to go out and source funding, that I had some individuals that I knew that I would reach out to, and those are decisions that are also super important because, investor relationships are very much like a marriage as well. And, access to capital is great, but what comes with it is maybe even more important. And so, there was one individual in particular that I had gotten to know through my time at Alys that had a home there, an incredibly successful businessman. But I was really had taken notice of how he engaged all of the team members and the staff, and knew them, and was so thoughtful, and was just, you really could see on display what a great human being this guy was. He'd certainly had incredible success in his own life, but he was very humble. And he was very gracious to everybody, myself and everybody that worked, servicing. And as I got to know him better, I really began to appreciate, the quality of individual and quality of human being he was. And he had at one point reached out and said, hey, if you ever need help, or, let me know. And so I went back to him and had a conversation, and, I probably spent more time trying to talk him out of it, because think about this conversation, the timing, and it's tone deaf, right? Like, hey, every other restaurant in the country is uncertain of its future and closing down, and I'm asking you to invest in one. And the funny thing is they were more bullish on the idea than I was. I was literally, a little bit feeling like, we had jumped out of an airplane without a parachute and we were just waiting to hit the ground. And so it was beyond, imaginable that he would believe in the idea, see the longer term, and choose to take that risk. And then he introduced us to another individual who's a retired financial executive that had a great understanding of from out of the banking industry, and had an incredible understanding of money and how to manage money, and how to work with money, and how to invest money. And so we ended up with a great group of people is our investment team that also brought expertise to the table that made us a better business because of them. And so whatever we gave up in equity to have them, was well worth it, and even now looking back on the success of the restaurant, you could say, well, what if, but I really don't ever have a reason to do that, because they brought so much to the table to allow us to be better at what we're doing and the capacity to grow. So we were able to do this, essentially without any bank debt. And that became a huge, piece to the puzzle in terms of, our ability to grow, the integrity of the business from, maturing almost earlier because we had great success in the first years. We weren't carrying we weren't carrying debt. That group had come together and we had done it. And it really was a game changer, I think, for the long term of what we're trying to do, as well as, sort of navigating that crisis of the pandemic.
We started this podcast 16 years ago in March. And one of the first people I had on here, is a guy named Dave Query, and he owns a group of restaurants out in Boulder, Colorado. And he said something to me that I'll always remember. I think it's true really in any business, but particularly in restaurants, is when you're bringing on investors, it is in some ways like a marriage. And you have to be really mindful of who those people are. They might have money, but I think you nailed something that's so important. As you saw this, your first person you were talking, his character and the way a lot of people with a lot of money are not the people that you want. They might have money to put into your business, but they might also have a lot of demands that come along with that. And it might take a lot of time to manage that. And they might have different ideas. And even though they're in maybe a minority share, it becomes this thing where you're spending all of your time
managing them.
And and that's what I remember. He said that. He said, because he had been through this, right? Like, you want that money, you want that check, but just know what comes with it, and don't make a myopic decision. I think you brought it. I remember that, and I thought it was such an important thing to say. And you just, here we are 16 years later, but that's a principle that will always apply.
I think that's critical advice for anyone who's contemplating, starting any business. Really, I think it matters. But certainly, I think, to your point, the restaurant side of it, people, the old adage, these people that show up and, they have, a minority investment, and then they walk in the building and start to direct everybody. And,
right.
I can't say enough how wonderful the investment group that we have, just in terms of their value add to the business to make it better. The character integrity, there really are these incredibly successful people that are also incredibly wonderful human beings, and they're very giving in what they do. Their charitable giving, their advice giving, their mentorship. They've been great. I mean, and they set very high expectations, but they have done so with incredible regard for. Look, we're in, and he said it. It was probably the most compelling thing that in the midst of all that sort of uncertainty, when those individuals, kind of sat with me, I was a little bit remiss to sort of, like, I kind of thought they were being nice, and I wasn't sure they were really serious about investing. I thought they were just being polite. And so I kind of didn't go into those conversations with a lot of expectations, but I had done a presentation to the homeowners at Alys for, and one of them had come up to me after that presentation and said, "Hey, I don't want to pressure you, but I meant what I said," and looked at me and says, "Look, he says, I'm not investing in a restaurant. I'm investing in you." And I mean, those are words that I tell this story at orientation to the team because I want them to understand, how we got to where we did and why and what makes us, I think, unique in some ways. But I mean, I cried because at that point, I didn't know how the story was going to end. It didn't look great, given the set of circumstances. And that was exactly, I think, what I needed to hear to sort of be able to kind of find the strength and the focus to forge ahead. And it was wonderful because they did invest and we did end up, and now we've got, 3 projects in 5 years that are, up and running, and I'm sure we'll, start a conversation eventually about the next one. So it's been wonderful that part of it. I think the rest doesn't, what and what you can do and what you can create, but that part of it's so important because managing that and being able to create sustainability is everything in this business.
Mm-hmm.
But we take that same philosophy and practice that with the team that works with us. We're here to grow anyone who wants to grow. We believe in them and what they're capable of doing. And that's the team we want here. We, as you said earlier about complaining, that's not something that's allowed in this building. We don't have complaining. We have, solutions, and you come to us with a problem. If you can't figure it out, we are here for you. There is a team of people here to support you, but we want what's best for everybody. We want a team of people who want to come and grow, and we will support that and believe in that as much as they believe in us. So it has.
Oh, that's such a wonderful and important mindset, Angie, is go. It's people. I mean, managing people. People are always going to have complaints. This is a problem. That's a problem. The question is then how do we solve this problem together, and how do we turn this problem into an opportunity? I had a guy on the podcast recently. I thought he articulated it so well. He just said that we don't believe we have problems here. We believe we have challenges, and we turn those challenges into opportunities to learn and to grow. What an important mindset. And y'all are clearly, you're more than, and this is what's so, I just have so much respect for people that own and run restaurants because there's so many things you have to figure out. And there's so many plates that are spinning in the air all the time and so many things you have to balance. But one of the wonderful opportunities in the restaurant business, particularly when you're with locally owned or independent businesses like yours, is that when you go work in a place like this, if you go find owners who share your philosophy, you have these opportunities to learn a tradable set of skills that are going to work in any industry. This is why I have 3 kids, and one of them will start this summer. I've had all 3 of them work. The other 2 are older. Like, you got to work in a restaurant for a summer because if you can, busy Friday night, things are like all kinds of crazy stuff happening. If you can learn to deal with that and keep your cool, there's not many things that you're going to do that are going to be more challenging. I always equate like a busy skill to like a ER or something like that. Like, I mean, it's just so much happening, and to be able to manage that calmly and to still provide a really intentional and thoughtful experience for your guests, and then to still be kind and intentional and present with your teammates, that's going to do well for you anywhere, even more so now than ever, because, we see less of that now. But I think that in a restaurant, you have this opportunity to learn this stuff. And then what people start to find is sometimes where they think this is like a part-time thing, you start to go, wait a minute, now I'm with a group. I mean, Jeremy and Angie they've built these great places. They're growing. There's opportunity for me to grow. And then you can become part of this team and take on more responsibilities. You're right there working day to day with the owner of the business, so you start to understand what that's all about. I just think it's a wonderful opportunity, and I would imagine that you probably have people that y'all have brought in that maybe didn't think this was going to be what they were going to do, but now they're bought.
Managing, yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, look, I don't think that modern day restaurant, I think any modern day restaurant and hospitality business is if they're not culture driven, I don't know the longevity, right? I think you're plagued with 100,000 more problems if you aren't focusing on the culture first. I mean, I was so fortunate to work for so many great luxury hospitality companies that, they were so well developed and so thoughtful and had such high standards and had so many different experts within the company developing the different disciplines that it was a benefactor that I got to learn from that. And we brought so much of those best practices into day one of what we did. And our operating model, I'd love to tell you I could take credit for it, but you have to give that to Isadore Sharp with the Four Seasons. But they developed an organizational model of people, product, profit, and it is prioritized. And we have adopted that and embraced that in an incredible way and said, look, we wrote our core values around that notion. We designed the restaurant around the employees first because we knew we would we'd create a beautiful restaurant for the guests. But if we actually went in and thought about the ergonomics of the workspace and where things were and how things worked, and we have windows in the kitchen and we have an open kitchen, so the kitchen feels part of that experience and part of that team. And we had some extra time because of COVID. We went into incredible detail ad nauseum of looking at every aspect of developing the space around the experience and around the team that had to work in the space. And that's in construction where you adopting those principles. And then, from our training protocols to, our onboarding and to, our engagement with the team one-on-one. And, there's so much connectivity and even in our core values, as Angie was talking about in the no complaining, we wrote a core value that's labeled collaboration, but we jokingly define it as the no complaining rule. A lot of companies say, oh, well, we encourage you to come forward and speak up and, share concerns and issues. I'm like, that's absolutely a requirement of the job to work here. If you choose not to do that, then you're not a fit. That doesn't work. We will never, ever be able to get 1% better every day if everybody in the building doing the work isn't communicating and collaborating. And so we do this reorientation every year with all the teams, and we go back through the definitions of what are they're jokingly called the 7 C's because I was probably delirious when I wrote them, but they're all C words. And so collaboration is none of them probably have any more precedence over the other one, but I find myself sort of leaning into collaboration because if you can get that ingrained in people's minds to look, I understand in hospitality, we're predisposed to go into the parking lot, the walk-in, the wait station and bitch and complain. Like that's human nature. But if you don't take that next step and present that information to someone who can actually do something about it, then that doesn't work, right? That doesn't fit the model of what we need in people that work with us. And so we invest so heavily in our relationships and engagement with our team, first and foremost, and then we concentrate on, the execution and the product and the technical side of it. And we think if we do those things in that order, that we can create a very sustainable business. And so we talk about that we make every decision and prioritize how does it affect the people? How does it affect the product? And then lastly, how does it affect financial? And that it is, I think, so important, probably for any business, but, doing what we do, that connectivity with the team and first, I think is the most important sort of step in the whole thing.
But we also provide the forum. I mean, on Mondays, it's an admin day for everyone. They come in, they sit around a table together, they work together, they problem solve. We share employees, we share management goes between restaurants. So they all work together, they collaborate, they communicate, and they work. We're there if they need us, but it's their time to do that. And then we pull back together on Thursdays where we have an hour-long meeting and go over everything that, any concerns or any things that they can't figure out. And then they go to their own individual meetings on Fridays where they meet with their team. So there's always a conversation going on. There's always problem solving. There's always opportunities. So I think that is so important. You can get in there and say, I need a manager in here 10 hours a day. And, I can't find that time for them to sit down around the table, but it is a priority with us that they are able to have that time and uh, forum to communicate and collaborate. So,
Yeah, the
Yeah.
engagement piece. I mean, everyone hates meetings, but at the end of the day, it's about this two-way flow of information and yeah, and it's very collaborative, and we tell everybody the table's round. Like our role in this is if everyone can't agree, then we'll be the tiebreaker and take accountability for the decision. But at the end of the day, everyone's supposed to bring, whether they agree or disagree to the table and collectively we make hopefully the best decisions together and not in pockets. And so, it's worked well. I mean,
yeah.
we
And me coming in, I mean, I fast forward, everything was just times 10. I didn't have 30 years background and experience. So learning that as
learn
I
quickly.
was
Yeah.
trying to solve all the problems for everyone and do everything, it's too much. It's too much for one person. And you can have the people in there, they're the delegators or the people that are just going to do it themselves. And it wasn't going to work long term. And eventually we want to retire. So we really want to build that team that understands who we are and what we're doing and believe in it. And I think that's one thing as we interview for positions, that our leadership, it is that we're bringing in people who really believe in what we are doing. It's not,
Yeah.
they can grow with us and we want to hear what they have to say and contribute. But, at the end of the day, we all sitting around that table, we believe in each other and what we're trying to create. So,
Angie, what has been, I would say, maybe the most surprising thing to you coming into this that you may not
um,
have anticipated coming into this?
well, I thought I could come in sunshine and rainbows and, fix everything. And I'm going to be the person that can help everyone out. And um, what I've learned about the industry is they're pretty much their own family, that the people
Mhm.
in this building, they create a family within themselves. And uh, they need each other and they support each other. And though they'll leave and go to a different restaurant or try something different, they create these new families. And so for me, coming in as somebody who's going to make this big change and be very supportive and be the mother hen of everybody, uh, it wasn't as needed, but it certainly is appreciated. And what I found that I could do was help with things in their own lives. I somewhat became sort of a mother figure, but I it's not necessary. It's the leadership that they really are striving for. They like consistency. They like fairness, standards. They want to be proud of where they're working. Those people that are here that put in all this effort and really appreciate the standards that have been created. They see so much value in that, and they really enjoy coming here. And then they bring in, their colleagues and friends, and it's something that they go home and, I think it's not just that, no offense to, TGI Fridays, but, I'm coming in and I'm doing my job and I'm going home. There's so much more to it. And so I was certainly surprised by that, I think. And I got to really understand Jeremy a lot more. He's worked here for, in the industry for 30 years, and I was home raising 4 kids, and, so he didn't get to be home as much, and, that's hard, and it was hard for me, and it was another thing when I came in, I said, these people aren't gonna be working 80 hours a week like you did. They have families, they need to go home, and it's a struggle. There are people, especially our first chef, who would sleep in the restaurant on Easter because he wanted to be here to prep at 3 in the morning, and I'm like, "You have a 2-year-old at home, you have to go home." And I started helping, take care of his son. I would babysit. They both ended up working with us, and, I'm taking care of our manager's, little baby once a week. I mean, we really, really have put ourselves into, the families of our leadership, and with that, I think they see an appreciation with that, and they're able to do that with the team that's here working with them every day. So,
Yeah, I mean, it's a stark contrast to, our industry is notorious for, long hours and, exhaustive work and not necessarily the best workplace cultures. And, I mean, I came up during, the more Spartan days of our industry where, working in very, in 5-star Michelin kind of driven organizations, right? Everything's about perfection and how you achieve perfection. I mean, TV now kind of sensationalizes some of it, but there's some truth to what it takes to sort of perform at that level. And so, we brought those same standards into our organization in the restaurants where it was appropriate. We just sort of created accountability in a different way. And I think it's a more sustainable way. And I think there's a big disconnect in the fact that you can have very high standards and have high accountability and do that in a building up in a more positive way than the traditional more militaristic or fear-based, and I told people, it's like I worked in an organization that worked 364 days to be perfect on the 365th, and you didn't know when that day was going to come. You didn't know when that inspector was going to walk in or check in, and there were 285 things they were going to expect you to either did it or didn't do it, and everybody on the leadership team knew what those things were, whether it was in their discipline. It was the spa director knew what was supposed to be happening in the restaurant managers knew what was supposed to happen. So like everybody was accountable and everyone knew, and everyone in senior leadership was so obsessed with the details. And working in that environment and coming, and seeing how I learned a lot, I suffered a lot and learned a lot, and I'm grateful for that. Nothing else, resilience, but paying that forward into creating your own company. And like, I didn't choose to lead in necessarily the ways that I was led. I chose to sort of work alongside the team. I chose to teach them the details, hold them accountable for the details, but I was able to do that in a more positive way. And even in the end, when they were not a fit, we still ended those relationships in a very respectful way. And we were very honest, and no one was ever surprised when we reached that point, because there's this high degree of engagement ongoing. And I was talking about this the other day with the team, is that I work alongside I only know one way to run a restaurant, is to try to be everywhere at once. And if you're trying to be at the host stand, at Expo, in the wait station, behind the bar, in the dining room, in the parking lot, checking the bathrooms, like all these things, and you're going to talk to guests along the way. If you get hung up in one place, you start to, hairs on the back of your neck start to stand up, and you try to immediately release from that moment and get to the 9 other places you haven't been. But if you're doing that with your team, right? If you're we were always taught that leadership in more fine dining restaurants, you had to be an organic. You didn't go to the table unless you knew the people, unless you were part of the sequence of service, right? You had to be delivering service to legitimize being at the table, unless you had an existing relationship with someone. So you were always doing the work with the team. And so if you were doing that, you were able to be at the table. You were able to see and listen, engage the staff's reactions, see if the table was marked, see if the water glasses are filled, see the expressions on the people, listen to what the staff are saying. And I explained this to the team. I said, look, the best part of leadership is if you're doing the work with them, then you're listening, and the staff are telling you something. The managers are telling you something. And, it tells you whether or not they're a fit based on their capacity to do the work. And there's, like 4 non-negotiables, right? Like, how much effort do you put forward when you come to work, right? What's your attitude like when you come to work? Can I count on you to be at work? What's your reliability? And the last one, and maybe the most important, was prove to me you can listen, because I'm going to give you a lot of information. I'm going to give you positive reinforcement when you're hitting the standard, but I'm going to, in real time, in the midst of service, be there with you to give you feedback as, hey, that's not our standard. You need to always announce the food. You need to serve from the right. Whatever that standard be, it's ongoing, it's constant, and great leaders become like the gravity in the room with those things. But if you're doing it with them, every person works with you tells you something about whether or not they're fit. And if you're listening and you're reacting to that, you're giving them that level of engagement that they know where they are, and then when it's time to make a decision. And I find the biggest challenge we run into nowadays is getting leaders to have this comfort level. Like, a lot of people are conflict averse, and we're trying to sort of teach leaders to lead in this fashion where we can still have these high standards. We can still strive for perfection every day. But if we do it with them, we're incredibly transparent and honest, and we give them real meaningful feedback. But we also are honest with themselves. I literally don't want someone to continue to work for us if they're going to never go home at the end of the day without feeling some measure of success. I'd rather them go somewhere else, do something else, and have that, But for us, for the team, it's not fair. And for our standards, it's not fair. For our customers, it's not fair. But it really does come down to that individual, we should be honest. If they can't be reliable, they can't have a great attitude, they can't put forward effort, and if I have to repeatedly tell them to do something to our standard, there reaches a point where they're just not a fit. Does not make them a bad human being. I don't need to have these emotions or frustrations with them. I just need to be honest. And I think getting younger leaders over that hump of understanding, and believing in that accountability and that process and that standards and that honesty and engagement has been probably the single biggest leadership hurdle, I think, is getting people to really embrace and understand that method versus just showing up and being a key holder and, going through the day to day of running a shift. Yes, those things are all going to happen. But if you're not focused on the development of the team and this engagement with the team, you're not going to be able to transform the reality of what's happening in the restaurant. And that's become such a big focus for us. But
Well, and it's real life, like practice. We had a gentleman in the kitchen and he just kept showing up late every day. And, I sat down with leadership and I'm like, what are you going to do? What's the plan? This is not fair for the team that he's working with. You explain the bigger picture. It's not just, well, he gets here and I don't know if I want to train someone else, but it's so much more than that. Everyone else that's showing up is noticing this one person that can't get here on time and teaching leadership why we do what we do. We don't just fire. It's not, well, he can't get here and we're going to get rid of him. I'm done. I just don't want to deal with that. We don't do that either. You don't know everyone's situation. We start out with a conversation, we check in, we make sure everybody's doing well, and then we set our standards. And if they can't follow the standards, then, they don't want to be a part of the team. But one thing that we have done, I think, is we do believe in second chances, and you can certainly get burned by them. But we have had so many success stories with just sitting down and being honest with somebody, telling them what we need to have here, what we value in them. And they just most of the time step up to meet what our expectations are. And then they work alongside this team that's doing the same thing. So I think it is a lot of continual learning and teaching, but once they get it and they start practicing it, it's such a great place to be. You enjoy coming in. I mean, I have been where I've walked in our own restaurants and I'm like, oh, the vibe is off. I do not want to be here. What is going on? Something's just off. And it's that one person that's complaining too much or, just the manager that maybe isn't holding the standards, and everybody accountable. But we're getting there. We're getting there. And I think that's what we, at the end of the day, want people to come to work and enjoy being here for the time that they're here. So,
well, you mentioned one of your biggest challenges is that people are conflict averse. I mean, that was not the case as you grew up.
It was the opposite.
Quite the opposite. But it's true.
Yeah.
I have my ideas, but talk about that. Why are they conflict averse these days?
This has probably put a lot of thought into this, and some of it is generational, I feel like, but it's also too. It's like I hear people my age that they just can't embrace the idea of it being any other way, right? Like they're so frustrated with and it's like, oh, well, everybody was handed a trophy. Well, yeah, okay, yeah, I get that on some level, but I think a lot of it is that there's a couple of things I think that have happened that have made hospitality kind of or a disconnect with hospitality, right? Like if you look at phones and technology and even eye contact's an issue, right? Like people aren't used to communicating. I mean, our business is people to people, right?
Yeah.
Not people to device to people. And so much of, the rest of the world is sort of driven, more, it almost leans in more to people to technology to people instead of that direct connection. And so I think conversational skills, I think, there a lot of people maybe weren't given that feedback and, coaching and correction themselves. So they're uncomfortable giving it to other people. They struggle receiving it as much as the next person. When we do orientation, we put the leaders in the room. We have our leadership team in the room with them. I usually deliver it, and Angie and I both deliver. go through these values, but we actually have a section where we talk about what leadership looks like and try to put it out there and dispel the myths and set the tone. So let's just be perfectly honest about what this is. And said, look, if you're not comfortable getting feedback before, during, and after a shift working with us, we're probably not the right fit for you. Right. And conversely, if this group of people sitting over here next to you that are all in a leadership role, if they're not giving you that feedback, they're not doing their job. Their primary job is not to run the restaurant, is to develop people. So if they're not doing that, you should let me know, because there's a different conversation I have with them. But we all have to agree, this is their role. This is your role. And we work together and we listen and collaborate. But at the end of the day, the standards are only real if they live and breathe and consistently are executed every day. And if it don't care if you don't do it once, someone should see it and say something. And then we have the opportunity to see if you listen and correct and if we're executing to standard. But every detail matters. It's not, maybe one individual detail is not incredibly important. They think I'm crazy. I use the example of bows on the umbrellas outside. Like, don't put the umbrellas up until you tie those two strings you tie it down with in a bow. Does the guest notice that? Probably not. I notice it. But I came from an environment where everyone noticed everything, and the goal was to be perfect. And so if you can do the little things perfectly, I know you can do the big things perfectly. So we make everything important. And whether the guests individually come in and notice any one of those individual details, or they just walk in the building and they walk out and they feel a certain level of quality and care and hospitality and experience because of those collective of small details, that's why we do it. I don't care whether they're aware of it or not, but I think so many people are not used to getting feedback and coaching and being corrected. And then I think a lot of our younger leadership, because they didn't get it, are uncomfortable giving it. And so we try to level the playing field and make it a safe place and a dialogue. And there's really there's no alternative. You cannot be successful in a leadership role if you're not giving that feedback. It is coaching. It is, you could use 1,000 sports analogies. And, my favorite one is, look, I played basketball my whole time growing up in high school and college, and I never had a coach at any level that was in the office during the game. Right. We have the great luxury of being able to play in the game. So, it's player coach if you're in the restaurant business. And so, but I never had a coach that didn't give me positive and constructive feedback. We'll call it constructive. I don't know if that's the exact word for it, but I've been benched before for not listening. Right. But the point being is that I never had a coach that didn't give me constructive feedback before, during, and I never played for a coach that we didn't practice. And I think for, the equivalent in our world for practice is training, right? If we don't take training seriously, if we don't train, if we don't give feedback, if we don't measure success and failure, we don't look at ways to improve, we don't give you honest feedback, and we have to pick a starting five, right, to go on the floor, take the floor, right? That's the same as doing a schedule every week, right? I'm going to put my best five on the schedule, right? And then I need to look at where these other people are on the schedule and where are we in developing that.
But you can't do that if you're not on the court playing with them. And I think I've heard one time, that's not my job. And from that point on, I let everybody know right up front, I never want to hear that, because there is not anything in this restaurant that we won't do. I've been in the dish pit. We've been in every part of this restaurant, and outside picking up my dry cleaning, we all work together, and so we can teach. And the way to teach alongside someone is to be in the game with them. And I think that's as cheesy as all that is, going on your basketball analogy, but you get to say things, you get to notice things, and you are doing the work with them. So I think that's
it's about having a dialogue and an understanding that we probably try to focus on more, is to just, let's be clear of what's supposed to be happening and what their role is and what your role is and what to expect if you work here. And if you're, resistant to that, or you can't accept that or embrace that, then that's fine. That's a choice, right? But let's just be honest. Then it's not, you're not a fit for here, and we wish you all the best. And we took I act like I've known this my whole life, but I didn't really put all these pieces together until much later in my career, because I did all these things to perfect, and then doing it, I didn't realize the benefit of what I was doing. I was just afraid to miss a standard or a detail in the environment I worked in, and I had 4 kids to feed. So I just was everywhere all the time to try to make sure I didn't miss anything to be perfect. And along the way, I was teaching and training and doing and sharing, and I built rapport with the team because they saw that I was helpful. They saw that I was working alongside them, that no one was outworking me, so that built credibility and respect with the team. But then over time, I realized that honesty, that engagement, and sometimes making those decisions to end relationships where people had consistently proven to me that they weren't going to be able to do these fundamental things, you know, it transformed the makeup of my team because someone left, someone came in, and someone remained. They were successful in that role, and the makeup of a team transformed over time. And then you get to this really beautiful place, and that was the thing to try to teach, is that this is a gradual process where you have to be looking at this as team building, and not team building in the camaraderie, hang out after work and make connections. That's important. But the more the framing and shaping a team to be what you need it to be, and finding the people who fit the positions they're in, and sometimes cutting people who don't. And that was kind of the equalizer of getting over that hump, or working to be better at getting over the hump. I wouldn't say it's perfect, but getting people to find solace and comfort in the standards and leading to those standards made that feedback easier to give. Like, if you believe in the standards, then doesn't come across as you're mistreating someone by holding them to it. In fact, you're doing them a favor, because we feel like people that come work with us, they could certainly go to other restaurants that don't have the same attention to detail, the same standards or expectations. I mean, we use a sequence of service for two of our restaurants. One's nicer than the other one. But we use the same sequence of service. That's 67 steps, right? I mean, it's that came right out of almost as a modified, Michelin experience. And we use that in less formal restaurants, but because we believe people deserve the same level of service regardless of the price point. And so we've adopted that everywhere. And so you could take that information and go somewhere else and be a rock star. But if you can't consistently do that every day, you're probably not the right fit for us. And we just have to be honest with people.
The example you use about tying the bow on the umbrella and things that guests may not notice, but you notice. I think that guests may not explicitly notice it, but they subconsciously notice it.
I agree.
And that's, you go to a place, I don't really know what it was about that place, but I really loved it. Like, or I went to this, like you even said it, Angie, you come in some days and you feel the vibe. Like, we have this, ability to feel a situation. We can't always put our finger on it, but we know that didn't feel good. I don't know. It just, something was off or whatever. So those things do matter so much, because people are busy and they're not paying attention maybe to the details, but their mind like is picking up on this kind of stuff, and it does matter. The eye contact thing is something that has come up so many times on this podcast over the last few months. I hear that more and more. It's, and I get the, everybody got a trophy, but the thing about that is, like, who gave them the trophies? We did.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, like, why, like, we gave them to, so it's an easy thing to say, but it's a bit of a cop out. Like, okay, fine. But again, to your point, like, all right, well, but that's a challenge that's real. How do we overcome that? I mean, we just sit around and say, this sucks, whatever. But I find that this generation, I mean, my kids you've got 4 kids. My kids are 21, 19, 16.
Yeah.
We didn't know, like, when do you give them an iPhone, and how, like, they just appeared, right? And and it's like, and now we're all learning, like, ooh, like, so now the schools, like, my kid that's in 10th grade, they have to lock their phone when they go to school, but they do spend, and then you add that to COVID, and it's like, this generation where they're just separated from everybody, and they're on these screens. Eye contact does not come naturally to them, and it has to be trained. The good news is that if you find somebody that has that growth mindset that wants to learn, these are like little simple things that you can coach somebody on that's 21 or 25 or whatever, that make a massive difference to your fellow team members, and especially to the guests, because what are guests used to getting these days? Not that. So the bar is really low. So it's like, well, this is an opportunity for us to just exceed this low bar. And if you're your level of attention, you're exceeding it so much that the guest is just like, this is like, where do you get this these days? Unless it's, in like a 3-star Michelin play or whatever. So, I think,
It's true. We end up, and a lot of people that come to work with us, they've worked a lot of other places, but they're, I think, a little bit sort of taken aback by like, oh wow, you have a lot of standards, a lot of detail.
yeah,
You
yeah,
you look at a lot of things that other people don't look at, and that's second nature to me because of the environment I came out of. But I'm like you. I think it doesn't matter whether it's individually stands on its own merit. It's part of a bigger ecosystem of an experience of quality of and creative people come in and it's a wonderful litmus test when somebody does single out some individual detail. I mean, we obsess over these details, in branding. We obsess over these details and menu writing. We obsess over these details in interior design and architecture and uniforms there's 1,000 little details that just sort of, and I love it because it's fun for me, but it's, you could argue at any point in time, like, well, why do we spend money on this and why do we spend money on that? And it's, well, because it's part of, our 3 pillars is right. It's certainly, the product, it's certainly the service, but it's also the design. It's ambiance is real. And I think in contemporary restaurants, people are looking for something, they're looking for the total package in a lot of ways. Certainly our clientele at a certain demographic, they're expecting it, and so we try to over deliver,
Well,
but
when
not at the expense of the fundamentals. So we try to balance those two things. And we put a lot of bells and whistles and pretty in what we do. We try to back it up with a lot of quality and the fundamentals of execution and consistency of execution, which is always the biggest challenge.
Well, when we read our reviews, we'll read reviews, we'll sit with the management team. One of the most valuable is sentiment. It's who's going to come back. They might have had something wrong with the food, or maybe the service wasn't, perfect. But are they going to come back? And that's what one of the things that we're trying to create. We want, like you've said before, there'll be another citizen, there'll be another scout, there'll be another, these things are going to pop up, but we want the place where everyone feels comfortable and wants to come back. And you get that with consistency, and you get that with, you know, what we're trying to do with the standards. But yeah, it's that.
I mean, all 3 of our restaurants. I mean, Citizen is probably the most formal. It's a beautiful restaurant. I mean, raw bar, wood burning hearth, an incredibly large bar, very advanced cocktail program. It's become a destination for all 3 of those things, and live fire cooking, raw bar, and cocktails. But Final Press is this market cafe that's kind of an everything bagel. It's a coffee shop. It's a bakery. It's a bar. It's a retail store. It's a restaurant. It's trying to do a bunch of different disciplines in one space very well, which is a little bit almost over ambitious. And we've learned a lot, but the team's been incredibly successful in execution of that. But the response to that has been amazing. People have really loved the convenience factor, the diversity factor of all of these different experiences in a beautiful space. And we still look at it's different sequence of service. It's counter service, and full service at the bar and counter service at that. It's 140 seats, with 100 of them outside. But we still look at the details of that service delivery over there the same way we do in that restaurant. And then when we opened Scout in August, we were trying to sort of take something that was near and dear to everyone's heart in terms of, perhaps a sports bar. And this was really less of a sports bar and more of a classic American restaurant or bar and grill with a sports theme. But we wanted to sort of try to reimagine what an elegant version of a sports bar would look like. And when we opened Scout, we used that same sequence of service that we did at Citizen, and people came in, and it's this very beautiful restaurant with leather couches and leather chairs and leather bar stools. And, but we have a pinball machine and sawdust shuffleboard and ping pong outside, and the restaurant's this beautiful, the restaurant side's this classic American kind of shotgun restaurant with an open kitchen and all this wood paneling. And we frame the TVs to hide them because you can't have a sports bar without TVs, but we made them look like art. We blended it in, so we created this more elegant, thoughtful version of something that everyone knows and loves. but we use the same sequence of service, and people come in and there was almost confusion. They're like, wait, this isn't, 50-cent wings and buckets of beer, we're like,
Yeah.
no. And when you read the menus, you might walk out because the price points don't reflect that either. But we do all the things people love, but we do them in a much more thoughtful way. Like we do nachos, but we serve them in this oval Dover sole pan, and we take the sizzle platter and we melt the cheese on top of the chips, and then we set it in the middle of this large brass handled Dover sole platter, and we put fresh chips around it. And then they take that to the table and they set it down, and then they sauce the cheese at the table. Right? It's a very, it's nachos. They're just elegantly presented. I mean, we serve steamed towels, rolled up hot steamed towels with our wings, which are French cut. So there's only they're just more meat and bone. You don't have all the mess of eating it. I mean, it was just like overthinking the things that everyone has this kind of familiar and love relationship with, the concept. But we just said, is there a way to do this in a more refined way and thoughtful way? And people loved it. I mean, but it's to that point. Those details, I think, go a long way, whether they're acknowledged individually or it's just this collective overall feeling that people walk out the door with. It's been the sort of cornerstone of everything we've done in all of our concepts, is to really, really be very thoughtful in every aspect of it, starting with what's the workspace like for the team? Where do we position things? How much storage? How do we lay the kitchen out? How much distance is from the front bar to the back bar so that it's not an extra step? Our bars have their own dedicated walk-ins and doors to get deliveries so they don't go through the kitchen. I mean, when I tell you we went to great lengths to figure out how to create incredible efficiencies in the design to make the work easier to do well consistently, that was where we started the whole process. And then we just continued that at every turn with training, with hiring, with branding, with, details. We just try to use that approach throughout, because we think the end product is something that matters to the guest.
Well, let me tell you when I finally bought in, and that was he was doing orientation, and I wasn't quite as invested yet, and he was telling a story of creating experiences. And Jeremy, worked all the time. He worked a lot. I mean, when he was home, it was great, but he worked a lot. And he was telling a story of the gentleman that's there with his family, and that's their week-long vacation for the summer, and he's doing the best to give these experiences for his family, and we can contribute for that. So he's sitting at this table where he probably doesn't see these kids, as much as he would like to, but he has this 1 week to spend this time and, invest in his family, and we can be part of that experience. And I cried at the time. I don't anymore, but, I bought in, and I'm like, I want to create those experiences. That's what I want to do. I want to have those special moments. And up at the host stand, I had what was it? What's the race? The Ironman race. And there was a gentleman that came in, and he was older, and he had just finished running that race. He had his adult children with him, and he just wanted to eat at Citizen. We were on a 2-hour wait, and I'm just like, I just don't know how I can make that happen.
Barely standing.
And he's still dressed as he came off the race. And he said, I will wait here all night. And it just, I mean,
Yeah. It was
so
for him.
make that happen for him. And it was such a great feeling. And we want, for everybody to have those moments because they are so valuable.
We try to make them, empower the team to understand that yeah, you're in the moment, you're in the weeds, you're doing all these tasks and multitasking. And you talked about like Friday night, like managing that. But we try to remind them not to lose sight of that interpersonal, that relationship. Learn something about them, do something with that information. We will empower you to recognize people's anniversaries and birthdays or any of these moments. And when we are presented that opportunity to do something, let's collectively figure out how to do it, because the impact can be so lasting and so much bigger than a great meal and great service, because we did something unexpected and there's a surprise and delight factor to it. And you're right. A lot of these people come to us and they work all the time and they're trying to make deposits in an account with their partners, their wives, their children, that they're overdrawn in because they're working all the time. And if we can make them look like the husband that they're not most weeks of the year, or the father that they're not, we can make them look like heroes in those moments. And that's a cool feeling. And it is a different level of hospitality. It's transformative and it's meaningful, being able to people to, people just connect differently around the table. It's a great vehicle for bringing people together, and it breaks down barriers. Food's a part of the best of times and worst of times, and you can console people through food. You can celebrate with people. And these are those moments that some 30 years later, I go back to what my mentor was trying to teach me in the hallway, that I wasn't quite ready to understand. I fully understand it now. And I preach on this ad nauseum to anybody who'll listen, is that there is an opportunity to see beyond just this basic fundamental understanding of what we do within these walls. And, Danny Meyer said it best. He's talking about promotional video for Lexington. He was talking about Gramercy Tavern being the most favorite restaurant on Zagat, 24, 30 years in. And he said, we're not going to be the best. There's people with better service, better food, better design. He said, but people come back here and continually rank it the most favorite because of our relationship with the people who come through the door. And I think that's a much more noble thing to strive for, is to be someone's favorite than to try to be the best. We try to do great work. We try to get better every day. And, but that notion of being someone's favorite is really, I think, about connection and engagement. And that's where we tend to sort of lean into focusing on that.
But we also,
Yeah.
we're
In addition to,
we're teaching everyone to give that experience to the guest, but we try to do that
to look for those moments
for our staff and our employees
Yeah.
too. I mean, there are so many things that we can do to just help out, or, somebody being, listening. I mean, we've had things and we've been there for people. We've been able to support people. We've
Yeah.
been at births of babies and deaths of family members. And, there's always those moments.
It's true of the team we work with every day.
Yeah.
Winning I don't know, a Michelin star or something is amazing. But I think what you nailed is so important, because that will create lots of excitement and buzz, and people will come. But then some. That's the shiny and new, right? Like, you're trying to build something that is sustainable, and if you win awards, great. I know, but the reality is, like, what you want is just a place that everybody calls their favorite, where somebody that's run a Ironman is willing to wait 2 hours. It's because of that. And you said this at the beginning: you've got people, product, and profit, but it in that order. And the people come first. You articulated that very well when you talked about even the design of the restaurant. So if you focus on those people, I think this is such valuable advice for anybody listening. Like, if you put your people first, not just your guests, but your team, the people that are going to make this experience great, if they always come first and you coach them well, you get them to learn to manage conflict through collaboration and communication, and they always start at the top, then the product is going to be delivered well, prepared well, and delivered well. And then the profit's just the byproduct of all that, right? Like, that's the downstream impact of putting those people for. I'm assuming that's sort of the
Right.
calculus.
Yeah, I mean, it's foundation, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's the jumping off point for everything, is that, what I can do is irrelevant, right? Because I'm not serving the most guests in the building. I'm not having that. I don't get the luxury of having that as many of those moments as I used to. And I miss that, but the value is in the people, at the ground level delivering these experiences, and you've got to prepare them. You've got to focus them. You've got to resource them. That's our job, right? Is that if we can sort of guide and teach and coach and mentor and remove obstacles and resource things and grow them, and create retention within the team, then we have a shot at living up to what we're aspiring to do. And you're right. I mean, we're not in a major market, right? I don't expect Michelin's going to show up here. I mean, those are all wonderful things. And I would love nothing more than for the work that we do, that our teams to get that recognition, right? I've been able to be a part of that in my lifetime. It's wonderful. But to your point, it's not what I wake up every day and look forward to come doing. I would love for that acknowledgement and recognition for the team that shows up every day and does that work to have that trophy, right? That would be a well-deserved one I feel like for them, but it isn't the driving factor, right? It's our sort of focus is rooted in, you know, building relationships with our teams and creating the capacity to do great things and get better every day and then that commitment to connect with the guest and give them, you know, these experiences and opportunities. And, you know, it's still a business, right? At the end of the day, but it's much more rewarding to look at it through this lens and know that if we can do these things well, we have a much better shot at creating a sustainable business. And, you know, we didn't build these things to sell them. We literally look at this as a very long-term picture. So when we make decisions today, we think about how's that, you know, what does that look like in here when Citizen's 25, you know,
Yeah.
God willing, you know, we have that sort of longevity. That is certainly the focus and the intent. You know, it's not a short-term gain for us. It's very much a long-term gain. Absolutely.
Are your kids involved in the business, or do you think they will?
We do. We have 4 kids, and they've all worked with us. We have
Except for one.
No, she worked with us. She worked with us one day,
One day.
and then she was
Someone said behind, and it freaked her
No.
out. And so she was like, I can't do this.
She was the cocktail server, and she had to go back in the kitchen, and she came out and she said, "Oh my gosh, Mom, they're saying hands and behind and all these words. I don't know what's going on. I don't think I'm supposed to be here." So she's one that she gave us one day, but we have 3 others. They'll work with us during the summer sometimes. Jackson, our son, he's with us right now. He's getting ready to make a move to New York. So, but they are great at it, and they come in very low key, and they don't want to be noticed for being our kids for sure. But they do it very well. They do. Jackson right now has been helping me with some admin, and so he's been in some of my meetings. And he came to us the other day, and he's like, "Wow, Mom, you do so much stuff." And so it's rewarding in that you know, they hear us talk about the restaurant all the time, and we're trying hard not to bring all that home, but for them to understand where we are, what our mission is, and you know, it's great. It's very rewarding. So.
It's fun to see. They all 3 have a great work ethic, which is maybe the greatest gift you could hope for. Well, all 4, but the 3 that have worked in the restaurants have just been, you know, relentless and effort and, you know, everything you could hope for. You know, please don't embarrass me because, you know, if my kids show up in here, it looks like nepotism. So you better outwork everybody. But they did that naturally. You know, we've got one that could probably take over and I could retire right now, but she wants to be in the intelligence business. She wants to work for an intelligence agency. So I don't know that I'm going to get her to do that, but she certainly has the capacity and the knowledge probably to do it. But
with our restaurants, with our kids, it's the same thing. We gave them as much support as we could to, you know, be who they are and not have to rely on being in the industry or, you know, what we've done for them. And, you know, we practice that with the team here, and, you know, we're going to give you the tools and grow as much as you want to grow. But yeah, full circle again.
Well, y'all,
retirement isn't looking anytime in the future for us.
That's okay. We couldn't stop working if we wanted to. We just have those personalities. So
I was just about to say, what are you going to do when you're going to like?
we would sit at a resort and look at everything that's wrong. So it's really better than not.
Y'all, this has been a wonderful conversation. I tip my hat to Sprout House Agency who introduced us to you, and Taylor Huff and the team there. They're great. Y'all are our 4th guest from that agency now, and always just phenomenal conversations. I mean, this is so valuable for an audience that, you know, we started this podcast, as I said, 16 years ago. The goal was to educate and inspire aspiring restaurant owners, other restaurant owners that are wanting to know what their peers are doing. This is both of those in spades. So, Alys Beach. So, never been there, but I do have a buddy who moved there from San Francisco. He's in finance, and he moved there a few years ago. And I hear it's amazing down there. So I need to. I bet he's been. I'm going to ask him if he's been to those places. I'm sure he has.
Pictures don't do it justice.
Yes, you should definitely come visit.
Architecturally beautifully designed kind of community. It's super neat. So,
well, I need to give the Panhandle another shot because the I've been there twice. Once a long time ago when I was in college, but we went for spring break one year. We drove all the way from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And it was like this random March cold. We didn't even go on the beach. It was so cold. Like that time we were like, what in the world? And then I've been back, but very briefly because I mentioned Fuddpuckers. And so Chester he was one of this was years and years ago. We had him on the podcast, and then we wrote a book called Restaurant Owners Uncorked, and he was one of the people that we featured. And then we started making these little short films. And so we actually flew down there and went to Fuddpuckers and filmed him talking about the restaurant business. That was probably 12 years ago. So I haven't been back in a long time. I've never actually
changed a lot, and you got to get on 38. I mean, it's a whole different place. So.
Yeah.
You're always welcome.
Panama City Beach, you remember, it's kind of the spring break destination. They've worked hard and done a great job in kind of reimagining and redeveloping that to be more family friendly. Destin's kind of always been the more family friendly, but the 30A corridor is about this 18-mile stretch of highway that's probably most known for Seaside, the Truman Show and all that developed in the late 80s. And then Watercolor right after that, another beautiful master plan, new urbanist community, and then Rosemary Beach and the Alys was kind of the fourth one to develop starting by 2004. But that 18-mile stretch is just this almost become like the Hamptons of the South. And obviously, you have 20,000 acres of state park that somewhat manage the overdevelopment, right? So you have a lot of development, but it's still controlled because you have all the state park. And then you have these amazing beaches with, sugar white sand and the green water. And it really is, I think, one of the premier best beaches in the country.
We don't want to share that.
For sure. Yeah, maybe not. But we do. Yeah. It's definitely, if you've not been back to the area in a while, it's certainly worth a visit. It's a beautiful destination, and it's a great community. We've really enjoyed, we've been very welcomed into the community. We've been very appreciative of being a part of the community, and the entire county and Alys Beach for sure have been great to us, and it's been a great opportunity to be here and do what we do. So,
yeah.
Well, I will close with the one thing I ask is that listeners, obviously this is phenomenal content, not because of me, for sure, because of the people that we have on here. So give us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. That gets this content in front of more people. The algorithms love that. Jeremy and Angie, whether you listen to podcasts often or not, go on there, get your kids going there, give us a good rating, and so get out to more people. Y'all, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. As much as I can look you in the eyes through the camera, I really want to sincerely thank you, and I appreciate you, and we're proud to have you on here, and congratulations on building something really special, and my best to you and your team going forward. You're doing something amazing. I've had over 650 episodes of this podcast, and y'all are up there, man. You guys are crushing it. And
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you.
Proud of what y'all have accomplished, and raising 4 kids while doing that is no easy task. So well done, and I appreciate your time very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. We
really
appreciate it. Great to
come visit.
Yeah, come visit.
I will. See y'all.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.